Right, so Trust Board has got held in public, so there are no public in the room today, but at some point the public will want to look at the proceedings. So we get started formally. This Public Board of Northumbria Healthcare Foundation Trust. Okay, so apologies for absence, please.
We have apologies from Kate Thompson, Bijou Boswell and Alistair Blair.
And declarations of interest. Anything different from the norm? No? Then we've got some minutes to look at from the 22nd of May. We'll take those on the true record. Any corrections? Any matters arising from any action law or in the papers? Okay. Just look at the action law. Okay. So I guess from myself, these are really disruptive times, I guess, for healthcare in general. Certainly the Trust is just undergone junior doctors strike. Consultants are currently on strike. Came off from that, Jim. But as ever, the Trust is striving to do its best for patients. That's obvious, and I hope you'll see that in the board walk about some of the function, some of the real problems as well that the Trust faces in terms of the staff stories. There's a lot of hard work going on out there and in rooms like this. And as ever, my testimony would be just to say thank you to our staff, our volunteers and all our supporters around us, governors included. We are privileged, I think, to have such an active and interested and committed group. And that's appreciated. The Trust couldn't do what it does without everyone pulling their weight, I think very, very significantly. So that's appreciated, and I'm sure the board echoes that as well. With that, the real detail comes from Jim. Your dashboard, Jim.
Thanks, Alan. So the first of all, so we should put on public record. We'll go back there. Thanks to Alan, last public board. So embarrass you properly privately. There's the cake. I think you've been a fantastic chairman. Very difficult transition for everyone to get their head around. To be huge support, great challenge, brought a wealth of experience to what we do, and kept us focused on all the right things. So that's really good job. And embarrass you properly, as I said, and try and make you cry later. Entirely necessary.
It has been my privilege, but the words on the cake, I will miss you all terribly. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do tomorrow morning. HSC first.
Everybody's emails will be down below.
But yeah, thanks for your kindness, I appreciate it.
In terms of the dashboard, it just looks incredibly frustratingly similar to previous months. So strong relative performance. I think you're starting to see really the price of disruption in some of this. So some things not quite where they want to be, partly just because of that churn of cancelling, rescheduling, and getting ready for industrial action, etc. And as you mentioned, Alan, we all respect and acknowledge the right to strike. We should also acknowledge it's hugely disruptive for everybody involved. The team have managed it really well. There's an awful lot of people really stepped up fantastically above and beyond. So the service to the public's been largely maintained, but there is a price for it, and I think we can start to see some signs of that. We've refreshed our performance expectations within the organisation to just try and get more clear about how we restore more performance levels. And the next 6 months will be key to that. We should acknowledge that will be hard. We have continued industrial action. So, and then again, I think you can see in the board agenda just an intent to try and stay focused on what really matters. It's really important to patients and stuff. So I think we just keep going with that, and really nice flavour of the patient stories, that experience, guardian safe working, etc. About what it looks and feels like you're receiving a service or you're delivering a service. So as always, really look forward to this eventually turning green. It's going to be a while. We've got lots of continued industrial action. We'll stay really focused and try to get it as quickly as we can.
Comments back to Jim? I think good work has acknowledged that we do look forward to getting back to some normality, probably just in time for winter. Or maybe not. We'll see. Okay, so as you mentioned, we've got patient and staff stories coming up. Joe, are you introducing those? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that these two stories, the patient story, and again we've got a staff story that's two members of staff. This one's a little bit different for me personally because I actually worked with the members of staff and the patient for this story, which normally comes from members of my team. So this one has a special place in my heart because I got to know the patient and have got to know the patient particularly well by the nature of going into their home to be able to make the story with them. So this story relates to a patient who has a diagnosis, sadly, of MND, which means it's a progressive disease, and he's being cared for by the community palliative care team. I think what's demonstrated through this gentleman's story is the absolute importance of personalisation of care and the continuity of care. What struck me all the way through the process of making the story with the gentleman and the two members of staff is the strength of relationship and the strength of understanding between the patient, the community physiotherapist and the community OT, and how that relationship has supported the gentleman to continue with his independence in his own home. He is an absolutely fascinating gentleman who's had a wide and varied career, and is very determined to stay as independent as he possibly can. I think he gives some insight into the frustrations of social care in particular and how difficult that can be. But if I can, I just wanted to quote the last line because for me, it just sums up beautifully. So the very basis of his story in particular is, I believe that professional competency is important, but so is the humanity of the people that care for us, and I think that comes through in bucket loads in the basis of the staff and the patient's story. And just to add, there is a part at the beginning where he talks about the non-invasive support for his breathing. I had a little chat with the clinicians that have looked after him, and that was around symptom presentation. It was not classic, and that's why there was a slight delay, so that it wasn't classic symptoms. So going on to the staff experience story, so it is the community OT and the community physiotherapist, and again I think you'll agree it mirrors the reflection of that consistency of care, that understanding, that relationship, how they've been able to support the gentleman very much about maintaining his independence, in particular looking at the self-hoist, being able to look, because what's come through in bucket loads is what makes an absolute difference to quality of life, is being able to get out and to visit the various beaches and the beautiful scenery that we have in Northumberland and make such an amazing difference to his quality of life. And having that, being able to do that one-on-one and continue to do that one-on-one has made a massive difference. And I think the honesty and the relationship that we have also supports those more difficult conversations in terms of long-term planning for the gentleman, and you know, when it gets to that point towards end of life care and what that will mean. And I just spoke to one of the members of staff today, and they said they were actually going to do that today, but it feels really comfortable when you've got a strong relationship and you get to know somebody well, that you're able to have those conversations.
Thanks, George. Really good. Any comments? I thought it was very moving. Jeremy?
So Joe's picked up on, you know, a very important word that we had. We had a clinical strategy day earlier in the week, and we were talking a lot about personalisation. But I think the other word I would pick up is the word of continuity. So it is absolutely about relationships, it's only by having and making those relationships that we can have those really difficult conversations, which is the other part of our strategy, which is to try and address things before they happen so that we don't have to react. And I think that's organised way, that's the really tricky bit. But I think it's not just personal and reacting, it's personal and looking
That's the thing that really struck me actually. So his comment about me going to see his friends and out of the countryside that you referred to, so it might be better if you could have the conversation how bad it's going to be. And say, can you help me at the front end of this to do those things? And it's a big ask, isn't it? Because you haven't got that relationship. You know, it's just sad that desire to get out and result in.
you know what I mean, this is really tricky territory, and I think it's a very useful story to illustrate the impact that sort of disease has on the way you look at the future and how you manage and navigate your way through.
And I mean, I guess the other thing then is just the training of our people to anticipate some of that, even in that personal relationship. You need to build it sooner, recognise you're in it.
It's about what's in
In
it.
it. We're doing that. Yeah. Okay, it's very real. Well, thanks for bringing that to us, Stuart. Wonderful. So, do you want your usually miss this report?
So, in terms of the paper, we've had just through time, and we would normally bring full quarter one, but we've brought part of quarter one, just in terms of how we get our data, particularly from patient perspective, our independent provider. So we've brought to the board today as much information as we had at that point of reporting. I think if we look at patient perspective in particular, inpatient and day case, we see good performance. You will note that there's low numbers for inpatient for May. We've just done a review of our survey in terms of comparing it with the survey that we have with the national survey, and over recent years there's been some quite radical changes with the national inpatient survey, so we did some work to reflect that. So it's just delayed slightly because the surveys had to be rebuilt, so we expect those numbers to pick up. Again, when we look at ED, we're starting to go back into the top 20%, so our data's heading on the right way up when we're looking at NSEC, and the areas for improvement continue to be around weight and pain management. Although I do know there's a piece of work being done in ED at the moment to look at pain management in particular in the blue zone. So there's a quality improvement project there.
Okay.
Any questions on the
I don't know, so I sort of looked, I noticed the ED had gone down and was going in the right direction, and I wasn't quite so happy with the graph above it. I just wondered whether there was any sampling errors for the, we've had some quite low scores in the last few months around outpatients, and whether that's a real thing. It sort of might make sense to me in terms of some of the disruption that's been going on over particularly the last 6 to 9 months, but I don't know if I'm adding that up right, but it did look a worry to me.
Yeah, we both, Paul and I, we discussed that, and we wondered whether it was an impact of some of the disruption for patients in particular. But for us, we thought we would just continue to monitor that in terms of the data points.
We shouldn't be looking to blame the disruption, but we should know.
It will have an impact.
We should know what causes it, because the dips are clear, aren't they?
The ED scores are hard number one because that's a
Yeah.
powerful gradient there at the end.
Yeah, they're going in the right direction.
Yeah, it's still getting better.
Yeah.
Well done. There's a lot of hard work just to get there, I think. Okay, that's really good. So we've got Paul Waterbuds next. So this is non-executive directors getting out and about just to keep themselves grounded and find out what's really going on. Richard, you're first.
Yeah, so I had the trip to the north. I mean, it's impossible to find anything not to like about Berwick. It's a lovely bunch of people, and it's a real joy to go around. And I think I saw every last corridor, room, and corner of the hospital. It was a really good morning. Clearly, the more modern bits of the hospital have seen their day, and it will be good to see the back of them in due course when the new hospital opens. There were just a few general comments from me, I guess, in the day. And one was, you've got to know where Berwick Hospital is to be able to find it. And if we could try and use the new building as an opportunity at the county council to get wayfinding better, because it is pretty hopeless. And particularly if you're coming down the hill into the town centre, you're about, before you actually see the sign, you're past us. The second comment I picked up was a lovely member, colleague that I met and talked to, and Marion wasn't there at the time, so she turned around and said, "What exactly do you do?" And I think there's an interesting reflection there on whether we could do more within internal comms to unpack what exactly non-executive directors do. And I know Ross is going to rise to that particular challenge.
That sounds like an action.
Yeah,
Well done.
really good suggestion.
Yeah. But other than that, I think it's a great place. Great bunch of people. Some of the places will be better when we get the new hospital.
They are fabulous staff, and it's definitely a remote outpost. It helps if you can find it when you get there. I took the new chair, Paul, through it, and it was raining, and so I said, "Well, take a shortcut," and I went through the kitchen, the stairs, and you couldn't believe it, how narrow it is. And then we met everyone at the top of the stairs. It was really crowded. And he was thinking, "Is this Berwick Hospital?" Yes. But we finally found the meeting room and had a really good meeting. But it's interesting that a similar question. People asking us, "What do you do?" So I think there is something there. But it was a good meeting, wasn't it? Good. That's a good report on Berwick. I hope the new hospital, when it's open in about 2 years, we do equally well. I'm sure we'll run over it with a fine tooth comb. Okay, so thanks for that, Kate.
Thank you. So I went to NSEC and just want to thank Jeremy because he put an awful lot of time into a really insightful visit, so thank you for that. It was very busy at the time. I spoke to a number of patients in the waiting rooms, and they were all really impressed with the support they were getting and the help they were getting as well in the atmosphere there, despite it being so busy, which was lovely to get that feedback. Went around the ambulatory care unit, very impressive. Again, very busy, but it was calm, good atmosphere there, and the team spirit was just lovely to see. They were pleased at how well staffed the unit now is. I think the main concern was just about hours being worked because of the rapid transfer of patients to that unit and then the delay in discharge. Then went to the respiratory ward 7. Again, just a lovely atmosphere there. Patient staff were happy, content with it, clean, tidy, really welcoming despite being very, very busy. Spoke to an overseas placement nurse who already has only been here a few weeks, feels at home, wanted to thank the trust for the support that she's got, which was just lovely to hear that. And it's also lovely talking to a nurse who has come back out of retirement and is having the best time she's ever had with Northumbria, which is great.
That's very good.
Which is lovely. And it's also great just to see the staff working together, supporting each other on areas that they just weren't quite sure which button to press, and it's great to see that support. Again, the only concern was just beds being used for non-respiratory purposes, just because of capacity concerns. But it was a lovely visit, and it was just great to see the atmosphere.
I guess that is the norm. It's nice to see the norm as being upheld. Very good. Fantastic area. Okay, anything else on the staff stories, board events? Still, I guess you're getting around informally as well. I've been through the Edge Treatment Centre. And even in all this busyness, it seems to be calm. Everyone's been sort of diary and calendar for appointments. Looks pretty good to me. Good. All right, so I think we've got Freedom to speak up next.
Yes, he's just outside.
Bring her in. Hello, Kirsty. So, Freedom speak up Guardian for the camera, so you don't
Oh,
have to speak
yes.
up. Speak up.
Top voice, yeah, quietest person in the trust.
So there you go, somebody else.
Oh, thank you. So, hi everybody. I'm Kirsty, the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian for the Trust for Northumbria. I've been post for ages now, in the furniture, I think, although it's been refurbished. So, so today I'll just keep it short and sweet for you. The data's there to see where we've been at the last 2 quarters. There's no surprises. We've got consistency with staff speaking up, getting really good outcomes. What I've not put in this report is the cases opened, cases closed, and the kind of movement of some of that. But I was reflecting on that today, and it's quite consistent. So it currently sit at about 5 cases that are opened. The data reflects national data in that it's we've experienced that staff are reporting more. We're in a positive place with the anonymous contacts. We see that as a positive. If staff need to remain anonymous, then they're not feeling safe. So we've always had a low percent with the anonymous contacts. I think that's credit to how we're managing the cases. The kind of trend of the groups of staff that speak up, that hasn't changed over the 6, 7 years I've been in post. I've always had a high speaking up from nursing staff. I think in current times as well, it's good to see that we're getting different areas that are speaking up also. So it's also looking at those trends, looking at the quiet areas within the organisation, and it allows the different services in the trust to look at the data, triangulate that with our staff experience, SOC Health, HR, all of those services that we're all gathering similar data. So it's looking at what does it mean. We've got a lot of good working groups that I'm part of those. We're understanding, deep diving into some of that data. So I tried to do a bit of a national comparison, just to really reflect that the anonymous cases have been consistent at Northumbria and continue to be so. The other themes, and it was just to point out the graph there, it doesn't add up to 100%. That was always recorded on the old style report. With the new dashboard I haven't included that, so apologies. It's a bit difficult to get your head around sometimes, you're trying to add it up to 100. They're not mutually exclusive, so one person raising a case could fit different themes. So that could mean one person's raised all of the behaviour, bullying, worker safety. And a lot again to do with the role is I take people at face value, work with individuals. So I'm very much that person that takes, trusts people, takes people's word for what they're telling me, supports their perceptions, their story, their experiences, and just make sure we're getting that in the right place and getting the right support for those people and getting the right outcomes. So throughout, whenever I'm managing cases, it's always patient safety that's kind of at the front of my thinking. So through all these behaviour, bullying, they're all important, they're all part of how people feel at work. But it's also, for me, it's everything is has an impact on patient safety. So it's looking at that cultural aspect and support the organisation where I can to fill some of those gaps potentially, or to have conversations, initiate conversations, working with HR where we're doing a lot of early resolution work at the moment. We've got a new policy that's just been ratified at policy group this morning, so that'll go through. So it's looking at that shift and how what we came up against this morning was different terminology, how we're addressing people and just softening sometimes. So things like changing investigation to exploration, and then just we're moving in the right direction. It's constantly, I do a gap analysis of myself and service and working with the key people in the trust, promoting the training, constantly just, doing the reporting and presenting to all, committees and boards as required. Has anybody got anything?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. It's some interesting numbers in there. I think Bernie wants to comment first.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsty. We had the privilege of hearing the presentation yesterday at the Workforce Committee, and we had I think Andrew was there as well, we had quite a deep dive on the kind of wider issues. I know you've spent a lot of time, Kirsty, trying to develop a new style of presentation in more of a dashboard, so thank you for that. I know a little bit more sort of tweaks here and there, but you've done a great job, so thank you for that. I think what was really encouraging at the Workforce Committee discussion was the integration that's increasingly happening now between Freedom to Speak Up, the work with HR, the work with staff side representatives, the increasing work with the staff experience, and there's a much more integration and triangulation of intelligence on the workforce from wherever they speak up or whether the information comes from. So that triangulation of what we know, what our issues of concern for the workforce is coming in a much more cohesive and informed way. So well done and thank you for that, Kirsten.
Thank you.
So it can remain confidential though if it needs to.
Absolutely.
That's quite important, isn't it? I did just wonder about the bullying and harassment in general on that. It's like comparing the national week. I mean, we report at a higher level, I think. We seem to report higher than the national right across the board. I mean, is that because we report or probably worse?
I think because we've been established for quite some years as well, so it's I'm quite a quiet person that has a strategy, so I've worked to the strategy and involved the key enablers at key times. So I think it's more about the journey that we've been from 2016 till now. It's getting, it's reflecting the work that has been put into it from the Trust.
And the bullying and harassment, did you pick that up in workforce as well? Elsewhere? Speaking.
Yeah, it was just with reference to thinking about nationally with the stuff that Kirsty reports, but if you look at the National Staff Survey, we compare really favourably in terms of it maybe underreporting, because in the staff survey in other organisations the scores are a lot higher, but it might be that they're not coming forward to freedom to speak, whereas our staff report lower numbers in the National Staff Survey but higher numbers in freedom to speak. So that may be an indication that our staff feel more comfortable to come forward when needed to speak to Kirsty.
Sounds like the beginning of triangulation, at least is what Bernie was getting at. Yeah. Thanks for that clarification.
Jess, just on the specific of the bullying, yeah, we had quite a discussion on that, and what in fact was Andrew's great idea was about with the new style of reporting with Kirsty and the Workforce Committee, about creating that headspace for rather than just looking at the numbers and the graphs, but actually what does the data tell us, and having that kind of thematic discussion, bullying and harassment being a case in point, is a good example. So that's exactly where we're trying to take the kind of next level of what does the Freedom to Speak Up intelligence tell us.
Well, I think another good thing, I don't want to be careful about the details and so forth, but understanding more about the outcomes as well. So we've got lots of stuff around the number of people that come forward, and a lot of them still come forward again. I guess it'd be interesting to know a bit about what was the outcome. So people are raising these issues, what subsequently happened, people to understand, obviously on an anonymised basis, but the outcome about the outcome side as well.
I think from that respect, it's if I've had a case that's maybe gone on a year, 2 years, where it's somebody that repetitively comes back to myself, I'll often reflect on that case and look at, I've got a template that I use for doing a bit of a case review on cases myself, so it's and make sure that learning goes back into the appropriate business units and to report to, it gets known there. So there's room for improvement. But, it's a big thing we're finding nationally now is we've done Speak Up, Listen Up. How do we show that, demonstrate that it's effective?
Okay.
It's good. So you're going to the workforce a couple of times a year, in between board a couple of times a year.
Just one thing, just to say thank you to Kirsty, because I think the relationship between the business units, you myself, with you has really matured over the last sort of couple of years, and I think it's had to because of everything that's going on. But I think the other thing that we're particularly pleased about are the numbers. People are still coming to you, but the numbers that are repeatedly coming to you are reducing, and I think that's the work that we're all doing in the background to help as a team how we can do this.
It's fitting. It's really good. So it's great work. I know you're part of the furniture, but the reports come on, they're really good, and I think are very important to us. It's stuff quite often it's just off the edge, right and wrong, and a problem, and a big problem. I think keep doing the work. It's really good. So. Okay, Jeremy, Guardian of Safe Work. You're not in Florida.
I'm not in Florida. It's probably, I think Mike will be having a margarita or something and thinking about the strike. A Guardian of a different type. Okay, I'll do the slides. And he's put a lot of the same information in a number of different formats, so we'll do that. Lucky old me, I'm here. Lovely and sunny outside. 3 weeks down in the test, so it's not bad.
All right.
Okay, so Guardian of a different type, but exception reports are, we think, a very good thing. They do find out. So we're keen on getting new numbers, and actually I think it's quite interesting to see that it springs up in a certain specialty, some changes are made, it goes back down again, it moves around a bit. I think that's evidence of a really successful system, and the little spike that has happened with obstetrics and gynecology, there were some real issues that were brought up and some changes made that managed to get on. So I think it's a successful system, even if it's not, even if it was born out of a contract that doesn't have much support. So the majority of them remain in medicine. That isn't because medicine are particularly bad, that's because most of the junior doctors, particularly those who have unspecified inputs in terms of the work that have come from emergency care, work in medicine. So I think it must be at least 4 or 5 years now that we've had since the new contract, and we've now had our first 5. So I think that's an amazing record. Mike was very excited about it because it does give him nearly £300 to spend on something in the doctor's mess. But I think that it's a real credit, I think, to the team that it's taken this long to find that. As with all of these things, junior doctors are an incredibly important part of our workforce. They are hard to get at and engage. There's lots of them in lots of different places. We're going to get a new fellow from Health Education in England to replace Alan. They've worked really, really hard at creating a forum for that engagement, and that continues to do well. So I'm happy to take any questions. I did notice that the locum spend has drifted up a little bit this year. I suspect that's probably more to do with the recovery than anything else.
Despite it not being very well supported, it seems to work very well doing this particular part of the job. You can see it, junior doctors can see it. We're doing the alternative might be chaos and mayhem and disruption.
Hopefully, it's definitely not that.
Good. Well done, Mike, when it comes back. Excellent. So, next it's you, CQC regulation.
Thank you, Chair. This is just the usual stakeholder engagement report that combines a lot of the work from my team, but also Joe's team, who do a lot of the heavy lifting, and it dovetails quite nicely into the report you saw earlier. So, very positive position, we're complying with all the standards, and for me, I think the key theme this time has been that ambition that we've had for a while to get back to that real face-to-face rolling programme of engagement that's been so difficult over the last 5 years. So if you look at page 4, you'll see the team's been able to get out and about and meet some real people. visits to an over 50s job fair, the party in the park at Seaton Delaval, and the Islamic Cultural Centre in Whitley Bay, all really useful, and the kind of bread and butter stuff that we're much more comfortable and much happier doing to give us that more rounded view. So I think all the details in there. We've also had a governor election in this quarter as well, so well done and thanks to Jen and the team. All worked very smoothly. It's becoming increasingly difficult, I think, over time to engage in that way, but it all worked really well and they're being inducted now, so happy to take any questions.
Does CQC ever come back on this comments or advice? Good.
Not really, but it'll be part of a well-led process. And, it's a part. We weren't doing it before.
Oh. It's good. I mean, it's good to see the engagement. So be back out there.
Yeah, and I think we'll try and bring out much more of the sort of real stories in those weekly updates and the monthly ones that will circulate as well. So there's a bit of a technical one, but good to show that it's all going in the right direction.
Notice Margaret's out doing the deaf awareness teaching.
Some sickness, so good to have her back.
Excellent.
Any other comments? Good. So that's section 3 finished. We've got some items, section 4, to note. So, is there any comment, anything to bring up? So we've got nursing and midwifery assurance reporting first, which you've got in your papers.
Very happy to take any questions from anybody. It was a slightly improving position and hopefully that will continue.
And then we've got on the page here for corporate safety and quality report. Yeah, very open, very interesting. Financial compliance report.
We ran through this at Finance Performance Committee on Monday and really on target for our financial objectives.
Good shape. That's a lot of effort. And that's it. Any other items? Okay, review of the meeting. Jim said it's our last public board meeting, so that's been good. I think we'll do well. The freedoms are really quite important to us, just on the edge, but I think they're just another way like board walkabouts to keep us grounded, we're seeing what's going on. There's a bit of statistic around Max and Kirsty's input, which I think is really valuable. And the staff and patient stories, they make you feel quite uncomfortable sometimes. That's probably right. And there's probably a lot more stories we could and should tell, so we need to keep them coming forward. But I think we're in good shape. There's no public in attendance, even virtually. So, if there are more questions from board members, close the meeting. Thank you.